Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. It's been a minute. I am Aaron Chow, your host as always, and always my co-host is John Harris. But today we're talking NFL football. So jumping back to football off of basketball from our previous episode, which did go watch. It's our first kind of basketball episode of the season. Kind of gave our quick thoughts and summaries there. But anyway. Today, though, once again, talking NFL, specifically good old quarterback draft rankings, as it is that time of the year. I mean, as of today, March 11th, offseason literally started. We got a lot of free agency news. I think this is technically the tampering period. But yeah, it's going to be, this quarterback class is very interesting. Maybe if you've been following along, it's considered deep. Just overall thought, would you agree with that now that we've done the homework ourselves, John?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting that, every time we get around draft time, people start looking back on like previous draft classes, and especially with like Mac Jones getting traded and Justin Fields' market being dry right now, people are bringing up that class, and I think somewhat comparing it to this year, because that class was like, man, there's 5 first-round quarterbacks. And they're like, Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he's solid, but some people still have question marks about him. Zach Wilson, that's been a whole debacle. Trey Lance has been traded by this point as a backup. Mac Jones just got traded, and Fields looks like he's about to get traded. So, I don't know. It just shows the volatility of draft classes. So, we're probably going to be high on some of these guys in our top 5, and then like 2 of them are going to work. So, I don't know. It's just always interesting to wonder, like, who out of the 5 really will end up making it.
Yeah, and I do want to preface with that. Like, once again, like, we're probably going to be wrong, because I'm going to read off some of our previous draft classes here, and you're going to see we're going to be wrong. But there's going to be times we're going to be right, too. And, hey, remember, too, that we don't do this for an actual living. So, there's that. But we've tried. Anyhow, so going back to that draft class you just mentioned, just real quick, we both had Trevor Lawrence at 1, Zach Wilson at 2, and, it's funny how he's kind of the forgotten man now, because apparently he's a free agent, but does anyone really care? Sorry, Zach. And trust me, I was a high believer in you. And then 3s where you had Justin Fields, I had Mac Jones, which is now interesting. Obviously, I think I would even say it. Justin Fields better than Mac Jones at this point, and I guess hopefully the trade market shows that. But I think we both agree with that. And then it was flip flop, because then I had Fields at 4, you had Mac Jones at 4, and then you had Trey Lance at 5. And I had Kyle Trask at 5. I was not a big believer in Lance. I think that was the only shocking thing that year. We'll see on Trey. I don't want to say I'm absolutely right, but yeah. I mean, regardless, yeah, I'm at 5. I remember a lot of people, we were getting a lot of flack that year from Niner fan, or people who, I forget. We got a lot of flack for our Trey Lance, because everyone kind of had him at 2 or 3 that year. He was kind of sneaking up there, especially late in the process. So there's that. So I feel like we did pretty solid there. And then 2022 was a rough QB class, so take it with a grain of salt. And honestly, like, this class is one of the poorer ones. We'll see, but looking like it could be a poor one.
Pretty sure we both agreed to with that class that it was like nobody was first round.
Yeah, it was one where I was like, yeah, and then and that was the truth, because the only one was Kenny Pickett, which was like, because he was like kind of the safest. We were kind of see like, man, he wasn't really not much upside, and I know that's why you had him at 3. And once again, I think we see all the reasons why. I mean, they just brought in Russell Wilson, so it's very convenient, that timing. I had Pickett at 1, you had Matt Corral at 1, who I had at 2, and that he had the arm talent, but hey, size is a thing. And once again, we said like, he's a 2nd, 3rd round guy we had anyway. Malik Willis, we saw like consistency with him. You can say the same thing about Ritter, who, given all the opportunities there, and Sam Howell. You had Sam Howell higher, and I think I would kind of agree. At least Sam Howell proved that he could try to play quarterback with the Commanders, at least a little bit cleaner than Ritter. Because once again, I mean, I would argue that
at least for Howell, you have the excuse of the O-line. Ritter does not have that excuse.
O-line, not a great run game too, and like Ritter had like one of the better O-lines. We all know the great weapons and such, and even a solid defense too that gave them opportunities, and unfortunately just did not put it together there. So so that's, and then last year we were talking about this too before we hit record, but we did pretty well. I mean, I had CJ Stroud at 1, which we did catch a lot of flack for. Not a lot, but we got flack from the Bryce Young believers. So we had that too. We both like Bryce Young. We're like, hey, like CJ just showed, just we both felt he showed a lot more. That he could do a lot more. I think we kind of saw that, obviously this year. But who knows? Bryce still got time to figure that out. Then we both had Levis. Sorry, not Levis. I always skip over Anthony Richardson, and I'm sorry, Anthony. It's because you got injured. But we both had Anthony Richardson at 3, and good to see what. It was a good start for him. Just unfortunately got injured, I feel, for him. And then we'll both have Will Levis at 4. And I don't know if we both may have had deferred at 5, but 5's kind of like we're still a year and wait to be seen. I think I had like Hendon Hooker, and who knows? I mean, you may have had Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Who knows? But
I don't think if anything I had Hendon Hooker, but I can't even remember if I had a 5th. I'm wondering if I even did one.
So no offense to someone go back and check. That's fortunately like we stopped making it, recording of that, making recording of that then. So we'll see. But not that it matters too much. But anyway, so we've done solid for the most part. I mean, and then you can go back even a year before that was the Burrow, Herbert, Tua, and I think I think that was, I forget. Did you have Herbert over Burrow, I think, right? Going in, or were you still Burrow won that draft class?
I think I ended up caving to Burrow at 1, but
you're like, it's not that far, 1 and 2. It was like
my heart felt Herbert,
and honestly,
but my head was like Burrow just had a historic season and won the Natty, so I'll give it to Burrow.
And honestly, like, I mean, we're both still kind of right in that aspect because, like, I'm still like, I was a huge Herbert believer too, so or still am, and then Tua at 3, we say he's solid. Although, hey, Jordan Love, dude, I can't believe I'm forgetting about him, but we'll see too. Because he's starting to, maybe he could be pushing Tua for that 3 spot, but he's only played 1 year, so I will not be crazy, and I'm the Packer fan one here, so I'll pump the brakes on that for now. But anyhow, let's get into this 2024 quarterback draft class. So we're gonna do a top 5. And once again, if you're kind of paying attention, there's been about 6 names mentioned. So, yeah, we're going to leave someone off, and we'll have to explain later, or sooner rather than later at some point. But nonetheless, I'm going to let you go first, and we're going to start at 5. So, John, upon evaluating this 2024 quarterback draft class, who do you have as your 5th best quarterback?
Well, I actually wanted to hear you go first because I realized that I think every time we've ever done this, I always go first. So, all
right,
let's mix it up a little
remember
bit.
this for next time.
I'm interested.
I'm gonna throw it back. Anyway, so for number 5, my number 5 quarterback, I have Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington. I think obvious first round. Honestly, I'm just gonna spoil like these top five guys are deserved to go in the top 15. Penix I could see falling, who knows, a little bit, but anyways, in terms of first thing I look at is like pocket presence, and he had a pretty solid one. He's actually very shifty within the pocket. Only real knock right off the bat there is like I'm not in love with his mobility outside of the pocket, and I mean you can kind of see that a little bit with his injury history adds to that as well, so could be a concern, and his health is one of the major concerns going in to the process. Obviously got one of the better arms. I mean, you don't have to watch much to see that he has a great arm. He's very like Ben Roethlisberger-ish, and I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying he has some of those traits where like, Ben was just like shifty, stood tall in the pocket, that type of guy. And very solid, accurate wise. Only thing, one of the reasons why he's at 5 though, for me, once again, is just being nitpicky a bit, but does have a bit of a elongated release at times. So like the quick passes weren't really a thing for him, and especially at the next level, he has kind of a low release too. It's not like he fully utilizes and throws from like the top of the arc anyway. So like we mentioned, kind of like with Dibbs and Ridder before. And once again, not saying he's Ridder, but just a comparison to someone like that who has a long release. There could be an issue in regards to bad at balls, and concerns. Like I feel like a lot of the times he does have to step into his throws to be accurate and concise. So especially at the next level, you're going to be drafted to probably a mid-tier team. Your offensive line is not always going to be great. Like there's going to be times you're going to have to kind of do it more with your arm or your upper body as a more to having a clean pocket and space to work with. And then I was no knocks on his decision making or processing in regards to making his reads that I felt they did. I liked watching his offense. I think you kind of saw with the talent they had, they did utilize it pretty well, and he, for the most part, took advantage of what was there to be had and was usually aggressive and such. So yeah, I have him at 5. Like most years, he's probably going to be, a little bit higher in terms of ranking and probably where I would project him personally. But, this is a tough class. And he does have just one too many red flags for me to push him up higher, but talented nonetheless. And obviously, in my opinion. But anyhow, there is my number 5, John. Who do you got, buddy?
Well, if you asked me this a year ago, I definitely wouldn't have put this guy in the top 5. But my 5 is going to be Bo Nix from Oregon. When he was at Auburn, he was not special to me. He didn't really put up anything noteworthy. He was just sort of a run of the mill quarterback. I mean, even his final season in Auburn, he plays 10 games. He throws 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, like nothing crazy. But going to Oregon, it seemed like kind of unlocked him later in his career. Now, he did play 5 years in college. Because we did have COVID, which opened up some eligibility and all that kind of stuff. And his final 2 seasons in Oregon, he had 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And then last year, 45 touchdowns, only 3 picks. So he definitely stepped up the production. I think that in terms of just the overall talent, like he's got pretty much everything. I'm not saying that he's like a stud at everything, but he's got everything. He can be mobile. He's got a good arm. He has accuracy, solid decision maker. Like he's got a lot of good traits. I think the thing that probably makes him the one trait that I would say stands out the most is his ability to, create plays off schedule. He can run, get out of the pocket and just make some stuff happen. So I really like that. And I think that he could even, be getting into the first round here, to where, like I said, a year ago, you certainly wouldn't be having that kind of evaluation considering the overall body of work that he had specifically at Auburn. So he's been rising up draft boards. Even his completion percentage when he was at Auburn, it was hovering at 60%. Last year, it skyrockets up to 77%. The only really big worry that I do have about Bo Nix would be, was it maybe a scheme thing? Was it the moving of conferences out of the SEC over to the Pac-12? Like all these kind of things that specifically come with going over to Oregon. I don't really know enough about Oregon football or, the differences between the two conferences and like schematics on, the defensive sides to know if that's really a big concern. So I could be just totally wrong here, but that's kind of the one big thing that I think does worry me a little bit about Bo Nix is that it took him 5 years to really get there in college. He was a slow learner. Sure, maybe now, he can figure it out, but does he still have some of those issues and they just weren't being exposed when he went to the new school? I'm not totally sure. So yeah, I like Bo Nix. I think he's solid, but he is going to be at number 5 for me. We going Serpentine? Should I go number 4?
Let's go Snake.
All right, so at number 4 for me is where I have the man that you just placed number 5, Mr. Michael Penix Jr. Very similar to all the things you said, so I'm not going to, go too long on him. I think he's got a really quality arm. I really liked his toughness. It felt like he was very much willing to sit there in the pocket and dive for the play to make sure he got the throw off, even if it came at the risk of his own body. That said, it felt like there was sometimes that his accuracy was just a little off. I think that mainly to me stemmed to his footwork. It didn't feel like he had the cleanest of mechanics overall when it came to that. And that's not shocking. Like a lot of quarterbacks when they come into the NFL, the footwork is just not the greatest, but it's a really big thing. Like even, when I've watched, certain professional quarterbacks, like even Dak Prescott, for my Cowboys get broken down, a lot of busted plays and bad throws can be boiled down to the footwork just wasn't great. And I think that's something that he specifically needs to work on in order to get better. But in general, I thought he was a really solid quarterback. The only other issue apart from the footwork thing that really worried me was when teams did give him that. I don't know if I'm going to call it Patrick Mahomes treatment because it's the first time that I really saw teams heavily do it, but it's when teams didn't blitz and they were dropping like heavy coverage units and they only rushed like 3 or 4 defenders. It felt like sometimes his decision-making got a little off. Obviously, the passing lanes become more crowded. There's just a lot more guys that you're going to have to account for. And especially when the pressure got there, all of a sudden things get a little dicey because they weren't having to rush as many people and they have a lot more people in coverage. But when he's going against certain coverages, I felt like he was really good at, the arm strength. I felt like he was throwing like lasers oftentimes in some of the tight windows. So yeah, I just think that if he can handle the pressure a little bit better, specifically when they're not actually really having to rush that many people. It's not like blitzes that I'm referencing. Like I said, it's when they're dropping 8 guys in coverage, 9 guys in coverage. Well, not 9 because that's very rare, but specifically 8, 7 guys in coverage. It felt like he just wasn't able to read the field as well. So refine that field vision, refine the ability to handle the pressure when he has to buy a little bit more time because of the coverage, and then maybe fix some of the accuracy issues. And I think that he'd be a really solid quarterback. I think he's got the leadership qualities. I think that he has the mobility. He's got the toughness, a lot of factors that I think, the intangibles, if you will. So, yeah, Michael Penix is my number 4. Bo Nix was my number 5.
And just to add on Penix, I think you mentioned it too. One of the reasons I had him at 5 as well is you mentioned like tends to throw lasers, and like he does. I felt like, except for deep balls, but even like intermediate short, I felt like sometimes he didn't have great anticipation. More relying upon I'm just gonna fit this ball in there, as opposed to like, okay, he's gonna be open, let me just loft this right to drop it in the bucket right on a spot,
like the young Josh Allen effect.
Yeah, Josh.
Everything is you're throwing a rifle.
You don't need to throw a bullet for every pass, Josh. Like that's just not viable, like you said. So
right.
I think that's a very good point there. But anyway, so for me, my number 4 quarterback is actually going to be J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. I was pleasantly surprised because it's tough to always be like, I try to come with an objective mindset, but you hear some. You follow sports, you're going to hear some narrative and such. So I kind of assumed, okay, is this guy going to be overhyped just because his team won, the national championship, and Harbaugh made that claim that he was the best Michigan quarterback, college quarterback. He said, not even Michigan, college, I think. Nonetheless, but McCarthy was pleasantly solid for me. Like I think so in regards to pocket presence, I would say he's very solid. Once again, a little bit hard to judge at times because yes, like it was a Michigan, they were in a lot of really good manageable situations, but there were times where it was 3rd and long and he had to an obvious passing situation and he navigated the pocket well, or bought time with his feet to either extend for a bigger throw or just took off and tried to run for the first down himself, get the yards that way. That's where I think he's deceptively mobile. I'm not going to say he's going to kill people in the NFL at absolutely any means, but like obviously solid, like I said, solidly mobile where like he could if he has a lane. But I think his arm is actually pretty underrated. I'm not gonna say it's the best, but it's one of I have like in the top 3 in terms of arm power. He does have good velocity and he is very consistent with his motion in terms of it could be unlike maybe some of these other guys I'll mention or behind him. They can be inconsistent. For the most part, he is, and he can also do a few different arm angles, a little bit of sidearm too. He's no Stafford where he's gonna throw lasers with it, but he's for the most consistent. I had him basically comp to like a better, stronger armed Brock Purdy because like Brock can't, and I know he's a hot topic conversation, but and I think he has obviously a better, quicker release to explain that better for J.J. McCarthy. But and for the most part, lastly, like. Really good decision making, and once again he was in a lot favorable situations, but was very smart in regards to okay, I can take the check down or I can do this, and then okay, like now I need to start pushing the envelope. We saw it kind of in the college football playoff where there were a few drives where he had to make some big plays and make some throws downfield, and he took advantage of it and did that without hesitation. So I think he's really solid. I will say he's like one of those high floor, I feel like low ceiling guys where like it feels like this probably is where he's going to be coming out for a couple years. And it's just scary because I said we mentioned Mac Jones earlier, and that's reminds me a lot of that. But anyway, he is my number 4 quarterback on this for the 2024 draft class. I'm going to move on to my number 3 since we're doing snake. Going to someone you just mentioned, at your number 5, and that is Bo Nix. For me, I mean, you mentioned he's really good all around. That's why I felt. I was like, man, like not many holes to his game. You know, solidly mobile, can very much like McCarthy, can throw off, has a consistent motion, throwing motion that is usually accurate, and it's a solid arm, I would say. Honestly, I think McCarthy's a little touch better, but nonetheless, I think Bo is a better athlete than McCarthy. That's one of the reasons why I have him a little bit higher. And he had a little more on his plate too, so we saw him having to push the envelope a bit more, especially at Oregon, which was a little bit more successful in doing so. And yeah, I just feel like with Bo Nix, there's a little more meat on the bone, a little more upside, and he's flashed that at times. So yeah, it's one. I hate to kind of cut his a little bit short, but that's one of the main reasons why I have him over JJ McCarthy. And once again, it's just by slim, just because I just feel like Bo Nix is a little bit better at creating on his own if he has to, if the plays, not there. So yeah, I have Bo Nix out of Oregon at 3, and once again, JJ McCarthy was my 4th. So who do you have at your number 3, or if you want to comment on Bo Nix, you can too.
No, I think I pretty much said everything I want to say about Bo. It does make it interesting though, because that's your top. We got 2 more spots for you,
Yeah.
and there's a typical top 3, and one of them's going to be left out. Number 3 and number 2 were really tough for me because they're different quarterbacks, and they also just have very different trajectories in their college career. I'm just going to spoil it. The between the two is between Drake May and Jaden McDaniels for me. And I'm going to talk about both here. And so I'm kind of making a gut call, honestly, like right now here on the spot, because I've really been toiling between the two when it comes to their seasons. I think at number 3, I'm going to go Jaden McDaniels from LSU.
I think it's Jaden Daniels, by
He's
the way.
Sorry, not McDaniels. Jaden Daniels. I'm thinking of the NBA
Yes.
player. Yeah, from the Thunder. Jaden McDaniels. No, Jaden Daniels from LSU. He did start his career at Arizona State. A very interesting career arc throughout college, because somewhat similar to Bo Nix, like didn't really start great. His first season at Arizona State, he was good. It didn't light the world on fire. I think his decision making was one of the better things about him. 17 touchdowns, 3,000 yards, only 2 interceptions, which is great, through 12 games. But only 60% completion percentage. Then his 2022 year, he only plays 4 games. 2021 plays 13 games, but 10 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. The lowest, yard total of his career with at least, like double-digit games, because we're not counting 2020, with only 2,300 yards. So serious regression in 2021. And 2022, he transfers to LSU, 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3,000 yards, kind of back to his 2019 status. And then all of a sudden, this past year just explodes, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, almost 4,000 yards. He's rising up draft boards like crazy. People are thinking he's going to go top 3. He's, a solid dual threat, all these crazy things. Now, he did not really, I don't think he did anything at the combine. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he opted out of pretty much everything, or not everything. He opted out of most things, which is becoming very common these days, which is a little unfortunate because I think a lot of people were hoping to see specifically his 40 time. And I think he's a solid quarterback. The one worry that I have about Jaden McDaniels is just the overall career. It just took him a long time to really get there. And then that final year at LSU, he kind of blows up, has a great season. And I think that could be solid. But also at the same time, I do think his athleticism is maybe a tad overrated. Like, I think he's very athletic, but I don't know if I would compare him maybe to, like, for example, last year's Anthony Richardson. Like, Anthony Richardson is bigger, and I think he's faster, quite frankly, to where I keep saying McDaniels, to where Jaden Daniels, I think he's a lot lighter of a quarterback. I mean, the guy, he's 6'3". I can't remember what Anthony Richardson was. He's like 6'4", 6'5", right?
Yeah, 6'4", 6'5".
And I don't want to misquote this, but I'm pretty sure Jaden Daniels is also very slender, like very light for a QB. I mean, he's 210, so it's not anything crazy. But what was Anthony Richardson? I'm pretty sure he was like 220. No, Anthony was 245. So
Big dude.
yeah, like I feel like he's getting comped a lot to Richardson, which I do think he's a more refined passer than Richardson was. But my point being is, to me, it seems like a lot of people are kind of putting him on that Cam Newton Richardson level, and I don't think he's quite of that level. I don't feel like he has that bulk and size to him. So I don't know if I'd put him in that category of a quarterback. Like I said, I do think he's a lot more refined as a passer, considering what we did see in that final year at LSU. But I don't think that he has the athleticism, which was, back to my point. I think the athleticism is a little overrated compared to some of those like freakish guys that have come out recently. So I don't think that he had a lot of anticipation. I felt like sometimes he had open receivers that he would miss. I feel like his pocket presence needs a little bit of work, but in general, this is kind of where I'm getting the nitpicky part. And I just think that similar to Bo Nix, he kind of has it all. He has the athleticism. He has the arm strength. He obviously had the incredible season last year with the great decision-making, because the one thing about him that I really do want to highlight is that decision-making. He only had the one season, that 2021 season, where he was really putting the ball in harm's way. For the most part, he doesn't do that. So I don't know. He's very intriguing. I think he's probably the riskiest of sort of the top crop of QBs here, but I do think that he has a very high ceiling. So I'm going to go Jaden Daniels. My brain keeps wanting to say McDaniels. Jaden Daniels at number 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with Drake May from North Carolina. Another kind of differentiating factor between the two for me was that Jaden Daniels, I believe, is already 23. Hold on, let me check that. I don't want to be wrong on that.
He's 23. Born 2000 of December.
Yeah, which, by the way, just of note, this draft class is a little bit older just in terms of like the overall class. Like Bo Nix is 24, Michael Penix I think is 24. These guys are probably not going to be named unless you shock me. Like Spencer Rattler, Jordan Travis, Joe Milton, Austin Reed. Like a lot of guys are already 24 in this class. A lot of veteran QBs. I think Sam Hartman's also a little bit older. But anyway, I digress. So I'm going with Drake May, and he's actually the opposite of that. He's only 21, like going on to be 22 at some point soon, maybe closer to the season. To me, he's the more prototypical quarterback. He's 6'4", he's 230, he's pretty athletic, and this might be just me. I don't want to compare him to Justin Herbert, but the arm talent is there. He can make any throw. He's got velocity. He's got the ball placement. The one questionable part for me is that he threw some turnovers, a little bit more than you'd like. But I think the good for me outweighs the bad. I think that he has that level of arm talent that could put him in the top crop of quarterbacks if he can figure out the turnovers and just some of the decision-making issues. Because even apart from like the specific turnovers, it felt like there was also a lot of times where he was taking unnecessary sacks inside of the pocket, specifically in this last year of college football. Now, I will say, at North Carolina, there was a lot of specific things that I think contributed, because when you look at his sophomore season compared to his junior year, his sophomore year was insane, 38 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, over 4,000 yards. You're like, wow, this kid, he burst onto the scene. When that year happened, everybody's like, this guy's going to potentially be the number one quarterback in the class. Then this past year, 14 less touchdowns, 2 more interceptions, 700 less yards. You're like, what the heck happened? Well, he lost Josh Downs to the draft. I believe they did change their coordinator as well, and he was dealing with a little bit of an injury throughout the season. So I think there was some things that I'm willing to give him a pass on. But in general, the touch was there. He throws his receivers open. The anticipation, I loved it. I thought he had like good decisions when it came to, like we talked about, not just always throwing bullets, but lofting the ball. He's got the size. He's got the arm strength. So yeah, in general, I think I'm going to go Drake May at number 2. Like I said, does need some work, but I think the things that he needs to fix are very fixable.
All right. So yeah, I guess I'll just share my number 2 and then I'll mention who I left off, 'cause I think it'll be relevant, obviously, as John was alluding to. So for me, my number 2 is Jaden Daniels. I wouldn't, and I agree with you. I don't think the Anthony Richardson, Cam Newton comps are even comparable. I feel like he's more, and once again, I'm not saying he's him. I'm about to explain why too in a second, but more of like a Lamar Jackson in regards to if we're going to comp him to someone where, yes, like I'll start there. Like, it is one of my concerns. His finished frame is a concern, just in general. Like we've seen it too many times, and I hate to start with the red flags, but and that is maybe one of the knocks I would say is on it. I do have on him is that he's not Lamar Jackson in regards to he'll make people miss, and cause that's one of the ways Lamar and kind of deceptively stays healthy is that he's just so good that he usually can make people miss and knows when to slide and such. Well, Jaden is more on the opposite side where he's definitely not as agile, shifty as Lamar is, in the open field or within the pocket, but does have that Lamar type ability where if he has a lane, he has a corner, it's it's a foot race. He's probably going to turn the corner and win in most situations, especially against defensive tackles and linebackers, even at the next level. But I will say in regards to his throwing, he kind of had it all in regards to short, intermediate, deep, a consistent motion. And he showed a little bit of flexibility in regards to throwing with different arm angles. And I mean, like I said, I thought I was really impressed by him. I think he could come in and play and do a lot right away. And I will say, once again, I will do agree with the other red flag you mentioned, though. Would like him to be more patient in the pocket. There was times where he would just, it felt like first read's not open, and then take a quick look at second read. Okay, and then he just ran. It's like, okay, no, you had a clean pocket. But I mean, that could be coaching. That could easily be coached. I would be shocked if at LSU they just told him, hey, if it's not open, don't worry about waiting around. For the play, you're freaking awesome. You can go run. Obviously, NFL's gonna have to bring that back, but I think he can easily be taught that. And the sliding thing, hopefully, I assume will be as well. But I mean, doesn't have you alluded to with this frame like a rocket arm, but I still think is obviously good enough for the NFL in terms of arm power. I would say kind of like Joe Burrow. That's one of the few knocks at him. It's man, he can make all the throws, but doesn't have the most amazing arm power. But he can get it done. For the most part, he can still strike deep, and he will. He obviously showed that in this last year there. At LSU. Still needs a little more polish. That's obviously why he's now at 1, and obviously the frame is a concern, but I was very high on him. Once again, we're nitpicking here. John has him at 3, I have him at 2. But I was very impressed with his throwing ability, and hopefully he can. I think those other red flags are things that can easily be fixed. So before I go to 1, I feel like we'll have the same one. Let me while we're on the topic of this other person, Drake May did not make my list. He's right behind Penix. If there's a 5A, 5B, really him, Penix, and McCarthy, and even I would say Nix, all kind of in the same conglomerate area for me. I just feel like with May, and maybe I'm judging his last season too much, and I did that with Stingley and such. But I just really like to go off, what have you done for me recently? And a huge red flag for me was the footwork. And that led to a lot of inaccuracy at times, and it seems like awkward throws for him. And I felt like he was one of the worst in regards to pocket presence. Once again, he still had solid one, but there'd be times where because of his footwork and such, it just didn't work out. And there was a play that to be had, but because he was sloppy, it didn't work out that way. And who knows? Maybe you mentioned those injuries he's dealt with. Maybe that played a factor into some bad habits. Once again, maybe that's something that could easily be coached, but it was just way too often and occurring for me. That's why I have a huge red flag there. And then also with that, and this may be because you mentioned losing some quality players like Josh Downs and coaching changes, but just didn't process and seemed to know where his hot route was at times. When he was blitzed, it seemed like he was a bit confused. And once again, that could be due to, like you mentioned, changing an offensive system. Over the off season for them. So, he is younger. I didn't try to factor age too much into mine, but you could say that's at least a positive for him. Maybe going forward is that there's more meat on that bone. But I will say, like you mentioned, the athleticism. He is right up there with Jaden Daniels. He does have all. I do see the upside. I think he has one of the higher upsides out of everybody. I think that's probably why he's up there because, like you mentioned, you saw the sophomore year where it all kind of clicked. And obviously, statistically wise, he was great, and he was in the conversation. But it just felt like last year was, and that's where I mainly am basing my thought process off of, was just a lot of bad habits that seemed to be not just one small time things that could be fixed. But who knows? maybe he could, he could easily be. Like I said, I still think he's a first round talent, but we'll see where it all goes. It probably will be taken very top of the first round. We'll see. But anyhow, I guess I'll.
Before you do your one, you want me to say my guy who didn't make it?
Yeah, go ahead.
People already know because I'm not going to put him one. It was JJ McCarthy for me. Honestly, I just kind of felt like he's a game manager.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's fine. Like that can still be successful in the NFL. Like we've seen with even like Tua, like I would say he's a successful NFL quarterback. Obviously, he gets a lot of criticism and scrutiny and pressure and blah, blah, blah. But we've seen the same thing with Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo or Alex Smith or what have you. Like there's a lot of good game managers that have made really good careers for themselves. I just didn't really see the upside. Honestly, I thought he was a good quarterback, but I just didn't really feel like there was upside there. And I mean, you know how I feel about game managers. It was the whole reason I had Kenny Pickett number 3. Yeah. I thought he was a better quarterback than Malik Willis, but I felt like Malik Willis, on an off chance he actually reaches the potential, would become a far, far better quarterback than Kenny Pickett could. And most likely he wouldn't reach the potential, and he didn't. So, I was wrong there, but I think for JJ McCarthy, I'm kind of willing to bite the bullet on that, because for all the other guys, I see just significantly more potential to like actually become like really strong starting quarterbacks for their teams. But I do think that JJ is going to be solid. Like I don't think he's going to be terrible. Just like I said, I don't love the upside.
Heard. And I mean, so anyhow, let's get into one, and then we can kind of do a full overview. Because I already mentioned about I think you hit it on that nail on the head there. High floor, low ceiling. I think we both feel about him. Just once again, these are our own personal rankings, so we may value different things a little bit more than others. But anyway, it seems like though we have a consensus number 1, and that is Caleb Williams out of USC. Unless you're shocking the world here again, because that's who I have.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said, so I'm assuming we both have Caleb Williams number 1 then. We can safe to assume.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
no, I got Tua's younger brother.
I didn't even know he was in this draft class.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, wow. Good for him. Anyway, I'll go first real fast. I mean, Caleb, I felt like one of the better pocket presences, and that was despite USC not having a great offensive line. Now, I know some of the other guys didn't as well, but he was a lot better in regards to manipulating the trash and also just still being able to be accurate and always throwing, it felt like the appropriate ball. I mean, you look at his, if you want to look at his numbers too, I mean, highly efficient in regards to getting touchdowns. I mean, you saw like touchdown interception ratio. It's very Rodgers-esque, Rodgers-like, Mahomes type. And like, that's the kind of archetype I'm throwing him into. Like, he's solidly mobile. He's not like Mahomes, where he's just more going to move around to extend the play as to take off. But hey, he could if he really needs to. Felt like he always, like I said, had really good decision making. USC was always behind, and yet, like I said, it was only that Notre Dame game he had 3 interceptions his final year, and that was 3 of his 5 interceptions on the year. And that was once again without a run game, and the air raid offense too, which sucks. Let's just be honest. And once again, USC not very talented this year, but nonetheless, he was. I'm not one to usually say like the quarterback's the reason, but a lot of the reason they were in games is because he was always making the correct play and taking advantage of every opportunity there was to be had, if there was one, and just making, like I said, plays that go beyond the playbook that the playbook doesn't call. So for me, just simply the most consistent and most upside here. Like, this is slam. It makes sense as to why we were already it feels like everyone already knows that the Bears are moving on from Justin Fields. But anyway, your thoughts on Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been projected that he was going to be number 1 for quite some time. I mean, 2 years ago, there was that little debate between him and Drake, just because Drake had that crazy year. But I think this year, with Drake kind of taking a step back, Caleb has cemented himself as the number 1 pick. I did like, honestly, that we got to see him in a different environment at USC. Worse defense, worse offensive line, all these kind of things, just to see how he handled adversity. And he still had a really strong season, a really great year. Even if it wasn't necessarily of the caliber, I guess, of his prior year at USC. The first year he was there when he had 42 touchdowns, 5 picks. He still had 30 touchdowns, 5 picks. Like, that's still a crazy season. So decision making is great. I think the one thing that probably separates him compared to most quarterbacks is just the blend of the athleticism and the arm talent. It's very reminiscent, and I'm not putting him up this level, but it's very reminiscent of a lot of the top guys like Mahomes or Allen or Herbert or Rodgers, all these kind of guys where he not only can move, but he can throw any which way, any type of throw you want. He's got good placement. He's got good decision making. He can do it off schedule. He can do it in the pocket. All these, like, it's any aspect of playing the quarterback position in the modern day NFL, he can do it. So, yeah, I mean, he's an elite level quarterback prospect. I did think it was kind of funny that all of a sudden, like, this year, just because of the slight reduction, I guess, in terms of the touchdown production and even just the winning record, because people thought USC should be going for the
national championship.
the national championship. All of a sudden, it feels like people were like down on Caleb Williams, but he's got a very special skill set, and that's not to say he's perfect. I think that he could get the ball out a little quicker, because I do think that, yeah, USC had a bad offensive line, but there were some moments where it felt like maybe he was trying to make the play, because, as you know, some of these quarterbacks do, they have all the talent in the world, and so they think that they can just keep it alive, but sometimes you just got to let it go. And I do think his mechanics could use a little bit of work, and his deep ball accuracy wasn't, pristine or perfect in last year compared to the year before, but once again, that's where you're getting the nitpicky stuff. The one thing that I do think is one of the biggest issues, that is a thing that Josh Allen has struggled with in his career, is the fumbles. I think he's got to clean up the fumbles. I think there were sometimes he could be a little careless with the ball and the way that he was holding it out. And so I think if he can clean that up, he's going to be a really strong quarterback. And if he can't, we've seen even when Josh fumbles, the guy can still outweigh that bad with some of the greatest plays you're going to see on a football field. So, and I think that Williams is capable of potentially producing some of that stuff too. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to go number 1. He's going to go to the Bears. They brought in DeAndre Swift. They got DJ Moore. So he's going to be stepping into at least a little bit of a better situation than Justin Fields did on that team.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like, it's one of those situations where it's like Justin Fields, walked, so Caleb Williams gonna run, unfortunately.
Yeah. And don't they have the 4th or 5th?
I think they have another pick near the top 10 as well. So yeah, they can add
I mean,
more.
there's like a possibility they're getting like another elite wide receiver prospect
or whatever they
hold
want.
on. I need to.
Yeah, I mean, the line's solid.
Or O-line.
Line's solid, but yeah, they could. Yeah, it never hurts to add another blue chip prospect there. It is a stacked receiver class, which of course we'll be sharing our rankings at a later date for that. But like I mentioned, they already have
it's ninth. By the way.
Okay, so yeah, there you go.
Pick,
a lot of maneuverability there, because they could even trade back if they're like, ooh, we don't need to, and get more assets. Like everyone thought they did with 1, but they probably do with 9. Who knows what we see what they get from Justin Fields? Because once again, I assume it's going to be. It definitely has to be better than Mac Jones' package of a 6 and whatever other change. Sorry, Mac, that's the way it is. But we'll see. Interesting to see how what the asking price is, since it seems like if you're falling along a free agency, there's less suitors and less probably, who knows, that drives the price down on its own there.
I mean, the rumor I had heard, which this was a few days ago before I guess all the talk of the market being dried up, was a 2nd round pick. And now all of a sudden there's the rumors of the Raiders being involved. If that's the price for the Raiders, they have the 13th pick in the 2nd round. So, you're in the top half of the 2nd round, with also your 9th pick in the 2nd round. So they could do some damage there.
And honestly, just to add on to that real quick, I think it'd actually be, with the way it seems like they're building, they had a Christian Wilkins, Antonio Pierce seems like they're kind of building a smash mouth defensive team. Like, a running quarterback might not be too bad, but we'll see. Obviously, we got to see if that deal is struck, or just there's not many other homes though. Right now it seems like, or it's like a little bit of game of musical chairs in regards to the quarterbacks, and like obviously, like I said, not going to Chicago because Chicago's getting rid of him, and then Washington, New England probably count those out because they both are 2 and 3, probably gonna draft a quarterback there. So it'll be interesting to see just if he does end up in Vegas, or I guess you could say a surprise suitor shows up. But it seems like that is inevitable because the rest of the seats are filled or planning to be filled in some of those draft teams' case. But it'll be very interesting to process. Like I said, I know I have May at 6, but like I said, I kind of just get like Trey Lance-ish vibes, or just in regards to like how being consistent with some of the fundamentals. But hey, maybe like I said, he could come in and they could fix all that. Every prospect is different, obviously, than the comps are making, so they obviously will not probably have the same fate. But it'll be very fun draft class. Otherwise, after one, seems like we all know who one is, and then the real draft starts at pick number 2, and then 4th.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I think we'll probably just look at wide receivers next. So we'll probably be back in a week or so with those rankings as this class is stacked. I'll have to consult with you once I take an overview look, because I feel like we'll probably just do a top 5. But definitely a stacked year. Seems a little bit like the quarterback class, where it's probably going to be a consensus 1 for us, and maybe 2, but we'll see. Sometimes things shake up. So probably wide receivers. Probably not going to do running backs. Sorry, running backs, but not.
It's just a bad class. It's a bad
and
class.
as we're seeing for free agency, it's once again and then
the worst part is some of the guys too that I was kind of considering if we did do a list tested terribly at the combine. So now you're like
it's like where you're supposed to
Braylon
shine
Allen,
as a
for
running
example. Yeah, Braylon Allen, for example, out of Wisconsin. I was kind of thinking this guy might be serious. He could be like a big thumper, and he is. But his I was thinking maybe more of like a baby Derrick Henry, if you will, big, fast, all these kind of things. Turns out the way he graded, he's maybe more of a Peyton Hillis, which is not as sexy. So, anyway, just as an example.
So we'll be skipping over running backs to wide receivers, and then probably not going to do, if you're wondering hoops wise, probably more closer to, or probably right when the playoff starts, just because it kind of just has to let the chips fall where they are. And it's not football where there's a lot of break in between. But we'll see what more free agency happens over the next few weeks, and if we may comment on that. But otherwise, that's our quarterback draft rankings, and that'll be it for this one. Unless there's anything else you wanted to throw in or add, John.
Just real quick, I did want to get your thoughts on the Brian Burns trade.
Ooh, yeah. So it was. I just saw the contract. What did the Giants give up?
Giants give up a 2nd and a 5th.
Yeah. Honestly,
and they are picking. It's like an early 2nd, I believe.
They're in the top 10-ish, also, I think. So
Yeah.
Anyway,
they're picking 6.
Honestly, I think, especially. I think it's,
and also the 5th is 2025 5th, so it's this year's 2nd, next year's 5th round.
I think it's really good value for I think Brian Burns is one of those pass rushers who, it's about time he's been a really solid number 1, yes, for a bad team, and I think he could fit in and be a really good number 1 with the Giants. So you also have Dexter Lawrence in the middle, so kind of going along with the theme that many successful teams have, that you have a good interior guy, and and then also just Kayvon Thibodeau has been much better than I felt. And he's been solid otherwise. I think that's very. I like the approach, especially considering that they lost Saquon, and maybe it's a good little transition. Maybe a little bit more back to a defensive team, especially if you're going to have Daniel Jones potentially as your quarterback, as we both have mentioned and know that he's okay. But he's not gonna, win you games by himself. So it's a lot like leaning into that formula that they made at playoffs a couple of years ago, where defense was making plays, causing havoc, and just keep us within striking distance. And eventually the offense might deliver or can just sustain the lead. So, I really like it. It's a very good move for them, and we'll see. The big question now though is the offense, because which feels like it's been the question for the past couple of years. So, and now no Saquon.
For me on the deal, I think the only funny part is that they got offered 2 firsts and a 2nd last year from the Rams, and they didn't take it.
Oh, the Panthers? Oh, yeah, I did not know that.
The Rams, last year the Rams offered them 2 first-round picks and a 2nd-round pick for Brian Burns, and they declined it, which was obviously interesting considering how bad of a team they were. Yeah. When you look at that too, I feel like if they pull off that trade, maybe you're not feeling as bad about the Bryce Young haul that they had to give up, because they kind of offset a little bit of it by getting rid of Brian Burns. So I think it's a little bit of a blunder by the Panthers just in that regard. If that offer was never on the table, then I don't think I would look at it like as badly, but just because of that offer having existed literally a year ago, I think it's a little bit of a blunder from the Panthers. That said, I think, paying an edge rusher what he got paid when you're a really bad team, it's just not worth it. Like, you're terrible. There's no point in paying a guy as the second highest paid player to his position when you're the worst team in the league. There's just no reason to do that. Keep the money open, start rebuilding, use draft capital, especially with that, the Bryce Young trade, offset some of that draft capital that you had to give up, with this trade. So I think that was solid. For the Giants, I agree. I think it was solid because they add some edge rush talent alongside Kayvon Thibodeau. You got Dexter Lawrence up the middle, so that defensive line could be something serious. That said, I feel like it was a little bit of an overpay on the contract. He's the second highest paid defensive end in NFL history. I understand this is kind of how it goes. He's also guaranteed $90 million. He's making $30 million a year. And the only reason I say he's a little overpaid, he's been in the league for 5 years. Now, of note, it has all been on the Panthers, and they were a bad team. But only one season did he ever have double-digit sacks, and it was 12 and a half. I just don't feel like he's necessarily putting up top 5 defensive edge seasons. I don't know have either of us ever ranked him inside of our top 5 positionally?
No, honestly,
I haven't.
He would always be like, if I didn't, because I always try to do a theoretical like top 10. So sometimes, like in recent years, he's been like a consideration for top 10. I think you're right on the money. Like, it's just, it feels like there's a little bit of a projection by the Giants. Or like, hey, we're giving you this extra money because your turn in the market, and hopefully, with all that, you can be there's a little more meat on the bone, like you're alluding to.
Right. And the reason I say that it's just a little bit is because he was on a terrible team, which means that they're not holding the lead. Pretty much by the time the second half rolls around, the other team could just be chewing clock. So you don't have as many opportunities to go after the quarterback. They also didn't have a great defense. So maybe the secondary is leaking and plays are being opened up before the pass rush even really has time. He's also probably, getting a lot of attention out on the edge. So he could explode on the Giants because, like I said, the combo of him, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau is significantly better than the defensive line that the Panthers had. So I don't know. He could live up to it. It just feels a little expensive, especially when you're paying Daniel Jones $40 million a year. So I don't know. We'll see.
Who knows? Maybe it's at least builds at least a good base, and maybe they can. Maybe they release Daniel Jones. Just kidding. No, a year, but maybe not kidding, because like we're seeing with some of these teams, they're not afraid to let people go. Even if it's on a big contract, if they have to, like we saw with obviously Russell Wilson and now all the Bills players and then Packers. We just released Bakhtiari. That's a little bit injury. That's a little more concern. But I know we have. I think regardless, we still have to give him like a lot of money in terms, I guess, dead room. So interesting. With the rising cap, slightly rising cap, but rising cap nonetheless. So all right, well. That will do it for us on this one. Like I said, those were our quarterback rankings. Just to go over real quick before we sign off. We both had Caleb Williams at 1. You had Drake May at 2. I had Jaden Daniels at 2. You had Jaden Daniels at 3. I had Bo Nix at 3. Then you had Michael Penix at 4. I had JJ McCarthy at 4. And then you had Bo Nix at 5. I had Michael Penix at 5. And then you left out JJ McCarthy. I left out Drake May out of the top 5. I'm assuming both McCarthy would be 6 for you. Anyway, obviously we'll see how the system goes. Once again, we're not part of the meetings or prior workouts, so we're dealing with a lot less information here than some of these NFL folks. So
we're also not getting paid to do this, so we're not sitting here watching like hundreds of hours of game film for every prospect to be like, oh, I can recall that one game in week 3 against it. We don't watch that level of film.
Just real quick too on that. Like I do best game, worst game, and then like an interesting matchup. For me, that's what I watch for them, because I want to see. Okay, let me see them at their best. Let me see them. Their technically statistical worst game, and then I usually pick like a good matchup. I was like, okay, like this team I know is talented in college football, and like let me see how they did against them. So that's how I watch it. So
to where if we were a college football podcast, honestly, we'd probably have even stronger takes on some of these guys because we'd probably watch almost every game of their careers.
college football's too much. I can't. Kudos to those that do that. It's hard enough in draft season. I can't imagine that. You maniacs, but once I say maniacs in respect, because that's a lot of homework and dedication. Yeah. But nonetheless, like I said, we'll be back next time with wide receiver rankings. For John and myself, that will do it. We will once again see you all next time. Adios.